During the Korean War, the United States dropped more bombs on North Korea than they did on all countries combined during World War II. The extensive carpet bombing obliterated much of North Korea's initial advantages, reducing the country to ruins and nearly destroying its industrial society. Surprisingly, in the decade following the armistice, North Korea's economic performance significantly outpaced that of South Korea. One reason for this was that North Korea possessed almost all the raw materials needed for industrial development, including phosphorus, magnesium, zinc, iron, tungsten, anthracite coal, and gold. By establishing numerous factories, North Korea could transform these raw materials into economically valuable products. The abundant coal and forests provided energy for both factories and citizens. From the end of the war, North Korea's economy grew at an astonishing rate of 15% per year, making South Korea's small agricultural economy pale in comparison. However, how could a country that had been bombed back to the Stone Age become one of the fastest growing economies on Earth? The answer lies in the massive assistance from other countries. In the 1950s and 1960s, North Korea received hydroelectric dams, railways, irrigation systems, and industrial equipment from the Soviet Union, along with food, oil, and fertilizers from China. Additionally, both China and the Soviet Union forgave North Korea's temporary loans and sent tens of thousands of free laborers to rebuild infrastructure, repair war-damaged factories, and restore farmland. Combined with North Korea's abundant natural resources, cheap labor, and the high demand for resources from other socialist countries, North Korea could quickly earn substantial revenue by selling raw materials abroad. Why did North Korea continue to receive substantial, continuous aid even after its recovery, to the point where it could sustain itself? This was largely due to the competitive relationship between the Soviet Union and China following Stalin's death in 1953. Neither country could afford to lose North Korea as an important ally, resulting in a steady flow of favorable trade agreements, free capital and resources, and opportunities to acquire equipment and technology. North Korea not only benefited from the rivalry between major powers but also from Kim Il-sung's strong regime, which enabled rapid industrialization and militarization across the country. North Korea transitioned to a fully command economy, where the government decided what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce. Consequently, all farmland and private property were nationalized, markets were abolished, and all goods, prices, funds, and jobs were controlled by the government. North Korea strived to emulate the Soviet Union, but such tasks were immensely challenging for even the mighty Soviet Union, let alone the technologically backward North Korea. When a government is tasked with deciding every aspect of a national economy, it faces enormous challenges. Without knowing how much coal is being transported to factories, how much iron can be produced, or how many workers are available, how can it determine how much steel to produce? If the number of hungry mouths to feed or the productivity of farmland is unknown, how can it set food prices? Nevertheless, Kim Il-sung believed that true civilization's pinnacle was self-reliance, leading to the introduction of the Juche ideology. To achieve this goal, he advocated placing all trust in himself and making great sacrifices for the nation. Juche meant that North Korea would no longer import food from other countries but produce it domestically, thus eliminating economic dependence on others. However, such policies of cutting off trade with the outside world usually lead to disastrous consequences, and North Korea was no exception. Kim Il-sung was portrayed as a paternal figure, which, given North Korea's deeply rooted family culture traditions, was seen as a perfect means of achieving social stability. However, the unprecedented economic growth also masked catastrophic economic decisions. When the first button is fastened incorrectly, all the remaining buttons will be misaligned. North Korea's initial decisions doomed it to become a backward country. Kim Il-sung was obsessed with building heavy industry, believing it could provide the self-reliance he valued. North Korea's lack of basic economic data led to severe shortages. In response to such problems, Kim Il-sung's answer was to mobilize North Koreans on a large scale, relying on revolutionary enthusiasm to make up for any economic shortfalls. Revolutionary spirit was expected to allow for superhuman productivity, surpassing that of any other country. When North Korea lacked steel, food, coal, or any other resources, the people were mobilized. The more the shortage, the stronger the mobilization, and harder work was demanded to compensate for everything. In the 1960s, North Korea doubled the number of coal mining ships to meet the energy targets set in its official economic plans while constructing large power plants. However, any North Korean worker dissatisfied with the doubled workload faced punishment. North Korea avoided using more efficient but expensive equipment, instead relying on brute force to address economic deficiencies. They insisted on using mass movements to solve the common inefficiencies of a command economy. In the 1970s, as Cold War tensions increased, North Korea's heavy industry and mass labor movements came under great pressure. To cope, North Korea undertook a large-scale military mobilization, requiring all males aged 15 to 45 and females aged 18 to 35 to serve in the military. This decision put enormous pressure on other parts of the economy, leading to another major error. As Cold War tensions eased in the 1970s, North Korea did not reduce military spending to address economic issues. Most of the Soviet-supported projects, such as modernizing the energy network, military mechanization, and agricultural projects, largely failed. To further its heavy industry and military buildup, North Korea began borrowing funds. Due to the relaxation of Cold War tensions, Western European countries were open to lending. Thus, North Korea borrowed $10 million from France to build a fertilizer plant, $20 billion from the UK to construct a cement plant, and $400 billion from Japan for heavy factory equipment. Unable to repay these debts, North Korea eventually decided to default entirely. By 1976, North Korea was isolated, and no country was willing to lend to it anymore. Any rational leader would strive to balance the budget and economy using national resources, but by then, North Korea was already in too deep due to its years-long political rivalries. South Korea's economic miracle in the 1980s posed a significant threat to North Korea. For North Koreans, the booming economy and rapidly improving living standards in South Korea, once part of the same country, easily challenged the North Korean regime. For the first time in the history of the Korean Peninsula, the South was more developed than the North, as evidenced by the 1988 Seoul Olympics. In response, the North intensified covert activities like assassinations. Despite economic stagnation, North Korea pursued large-scale projects, including a 2,600 square kilometer land reclamation project along the coast, the world's largest dam, and a massive hydroelectric power station. They also planned to build the world's tallest hotel, with a budget equivalent to 2% of North Korea's annual economy. This was a response to South Korea's investment in the Stamford Hotel in Singapore. Initially, North Korea hoped the Ryugyong Hotel would attract the first foreign investors, offering amenities like casinos and nightclubs. However, like all other large projects, it ultimately failed and remains unfinished to this day, standing as the tallest unoccupied building in the world. Since the 1980s, North Korea's funds began to dwindle, even though some projects were Soviet-funded. However, these projects were too costly and flawed from the outset. These erroneous decisions ultimately led to the collapse of the entire North Korean economy. In the early 1990s, North Korea's economy continued to deteriorate, with most of the budget spent on the military. North Korea made no effort to repay its debts to other countries. Like after the armistice, North Korea continued to rely on other countries for sustenance. However, the outside world was unpredictable. The Soviet Union collapsed under pressure at the end of 1991, and overnight, North Korea lost its significant foreign aid and largest trading partner. China no longer had to worry about North Korea being too close to the Soviet Union and reduced its assistance. Without food imports and aid, and with loans no longer being forgiven, North Korea faced disaster. Most crucially, Russia stopped providing oil at preferential prices, reducing supply from 3.5 million tons per year to 45,000 tons. This had a catastrophic domino effect on the North Korean economy. Fuel shortages meant coal mines stopped operating, power plants shut down, and chemical fertilizers couldn't be produced. Without fertilizers, more water was needed for irrigation, leading to the shutdown of hydropower plants, and the entire industrial and logistical infrastructure came to a halt. Within 3 years, North Korea's economy contracted by 50%. Food was no longer provided for free by other countries, farmland couldn't produce, and transportation was nearly impossible. People cut down forests for heating, leading to environmental degradation. Floods and landslides destroyed North Korea's remaining farmland. Worse still, floods ruined underground grain storages. The North Korean famine of the 1990s was an apocalypse, with at least 2 million people losing their lives, according to some estimates. It is irrational for a country to rely on loans to weather crises, but North Korea had exhausted its international credit in the 1970s, leaving no country willing to risk lending to a defaulter. Although it once sold large amounts of natural resources globally, North Korea's industrial system had collapsed, and its nuclear weapons program led to severe sanctions, preventing trade. Eventually, North Korea made a regretful decision to request international aid. Despite receiving 70% of its food from international humanitarian efforts, North Korea insisted on receiving aid without making any concessions. Ultimately, it did not undertake any reforms to address structural issues. Out of necessity, North Korea allowed small-scale market transactions for the first time, as the government could no longer distribute resources to the people. Why hasn't North Korea reformed? They know that opening the economy or implementing reforms, even slightly, could start an unstoppable wave of changes. They understand that necessary reforms could benefit their people, but doing so increases the risk of South Korea annexing North Korea, given their shared history. In 1994, Kim Jong-il officially took power. Facing economic stagnation and severe famine, he adopted a policy of simultaneous economic and military development, known as Sungun, or military first politics, in English. The military led North Korea's revival to ensure national independence, starting nuclear weapons development. When North Korea couldn't generate enough electricity, the military built new dams on many rivers. Today, hydropower accounts for 2/3 of North Korea's energy. Kim Jong-il even abandoned Kim Il-sung's Juche ideology. Given North Korea's unsuitability for agriculture, the government began improving diplomatic relations to change its isolationist policy. In 1994, North Korea agreed to suspend its nuclear weapons program, stopped long-range missile tests in 1999, and reduced entry into the DMZ to ease international criticism. In 2000, the leaders of North and South Korea met to discuss steps toward reunification. During this time, North Korea's relationship with the world improved. However, they soon discovered that even with improved international relations, they did not receive the financial and economic aid they hoped for. Investors were reluctant to invest in a country where the law was arbitrary, and countries refused to provide more than just food aid. It was widely believed that North Korea was not a stable country where sustainable business could be conducted. Soon after, North Korea's relationship with the world deteriorated again, and North Korea became even more unwilling to halt its nuclear program. At this time, U.S. President George W. Bush labeled North Korea as part of the axis of evil. In 2003, North Korea withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and continued developing nuclear weapons for self-defense. A significant event in 2003, familiar to some viewers, was the fate of Saddam Hussein, which instilled fear in North Korea. After all, when you possess immensely powerful weapons, people are generally reluctant to invade you. In 2006, North Korea conducted an underground nuclear test, leading the international community to believe that North Korea had acquired nuclear weapons. Now, North Korea reverted to isolationism. The benefits North Korea received from other countries were minimal, and these countries could potentially cause internal chaos. North Korea appeared to be a country that could arbitrarily open up and then suddenly sever all ties. The reason is clear: North Korea knows that South Korea, Japan, Europe, and the United States all wish for North Korea to be unified under the South Korean government. However, this isolationism also gave North Korea unique conditions to conduct secret activities, something most other countries lacked. Few people know that North Korea is the world's third largest exporter of drugs, producing the highest quality drugs globally and manufacturing counterfeit currency said to be even more convincing than real U.S. dollars. Some international criminals have sought refuge in North Korea and have been employed by the North Koreans. Around the 1980s, North Korea began exporting missiles to clients including Iran, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Egypt. The profits from these underground businesses are hard to estimate, but they have allowed North Korea to continue supporting its large military. Today, North Korea's economy and military are closely intertwined, with many industries under military control. Now, individuals can join the military at age 17, and almost all men serve either out of tradition, for the opportunity to live, or out of a sense of duty to the country. In North Korean society, the military and the economy are almost synonymous, largely due to the historical context of the Korean peninsula. The peninsula was twice used by the Mongols to invade Japan, twice occupied by foreign powers, and twice used by the Japanese to invade China. Therefore, not only North Korea but also South Korea requires a strong defensive military. In both countries, almost all men are required to undergo military training. North Korea has a vast arsenal of weapons available for both offensive and defensive purposes. In the event of an invasion, North Korea could mobilize 1 million soldiers for guerrilla warfare, making the cost of occupying North Korea prohibitively high and deterring their enemies from invading. Thus, both North Korea and South Korea are heavily influenced by their history of foreign invasions and the concern that history might repeat itself. From the beginning, North Korea implemented an extensive propaganda campaign to promote national unity and maintain coherence. This propaganda permeates almost every aspect of North Korean society. For example, it conveys to the people that no matter how routine their job may be, they are an essential part of the nation, and the state will take care of them. This instills a sense of belonging, boosts patriotism, and motivates workers to maximize their productivity for greater benefits. Despite frequent famines, the entire North Korean population continues to struggle collectively. Such propaganda is ubiquitous in North Korea. For instance, large speakers are installed at beautiful construction sites, coal mines, and other large work sites to play music and news. There are also dedicated propaganda vehicles, and you can find propaganda slogans on North Korean buses. Much of North Korean art, film, and literature is youth-centered. However, it is important to note that North Koreans are no different from us. They go to work, attend school, care for their children, and participate in sports events. They are just like people in any other country. Chefs are concerned about whether their cooking satisfies guests, people sing and dance in parks, and outdoor barbecues are popular leisure activities in North Korea. Today, North Korea's new leaders are striving to balance the hungry population with their limited available resources.